Ready to turn your Holley into a high-performance monster? Follow along while we torture this one into submission. Most of the time you can't afford to buy yourself a race-ready top-end carburetor. So, what's the next step? Modify your carburetor to act more like a race carburetor. That will cost you a lot of money. Modifications of this one will only take a lot of your time. Now, it's not the first time that I've done this. I bought this nice 750 carburetor to find out that it was a 600 double pumper. And I couldn't afford to buy a big carburetor. I bought this one for dirt cheap, and so I modified it, as you can see, to make it flow better. Today we're going to do it on this one, and not only are we going to show you step by step how to do it, but I'm going to put it on my flow bench back there and show you how much flow each step gains. Alright, let's begin. Now, the first step I recommend you not do if this is a street car, you live in cold weather, where you need a choke. Because we're about to eliminate that choke. We're going to cut it all off, but we have to be careful because this is where your air cleaner fits. This is where it seals everything. So we don't want to cut that off. We want to get rid of all the rest of this. We'll start doing that right now. You can see that I've got string attached to the throttle blades and everything because I've already done a flow test. I already know how much it flows before I ever started on it. Now, one thing I didn't mention, your vent tubes, you need to leave them there. Don't cut them off. You'll create a lot of problems. One more thing that's very important, you need to write down that list number because you're just about to cut it off and you'll never know what it is. I'm going to cut this off and save it, and I'll actually engrave it in here. But this is just a standard 1850. Okay, now all I'm going to do is just knock off the very roughest burrs, and then we'll flow test it again. The canned air. Blow it all off, and we'll test it again. Test number 2, air horn removed. was interesting. Now we're gonna do a little cleanup and prepping of this and make this a lot more pretty. And then do another test. Time for test number 3. That test was a little bit surprising. I know you haven't seen any of the tests yet. I'll show them all to you when I get done. And you can see how each and every modification improves the airflow. Now we're on to what? Test number 4? Well, the original test was without any modifications. And now I'm pretty sure we're on test number 4. Alright, so done all we can do to improve the airflow here. I don't think that's the restriction anymore. Our next step is getting some more air through these butterflies. A little bit of this. You can see where I ground that shaft down, and this will ground them screws down. If you're going to do this, your first one you probably should start at the screw and grind to the screw and not grind into the screw, because they're staked in there, and that falls out and goes into your engine, you're going to be very unhappy. But if you're going to go this far and grind past where the screws have been staked in to hold them throttle blades, you have to take these screws out one at a time so you don't affect where the butterfly is, Loctite them, put them back in, and then re-stake them. If you don't do that, it may not be tomorrow, it may not be next year, but that thing will come out and it will go in your engine. It will not be a good day. Just a little food for thought. All right, test number 4, grinding the butterfly throttle shafts. A lot of metal removed. Think it was worth it? Think it gained? Of course it gained. Got to get into the nitty gritty. And that's getting down in here and taking any imperfections out, which this one really isn't too bad. But there's a lot of them you'll see where they'll have casting flaws and stuff in here. You just got to go down in there and take them out. But this ain't gonna work. This will just destroy shit. You got to get a little Dremel tool, get down in there and do this. take the throttle blade off, and you're not going to do one test at a time and then test it. You're going to do all of these. You're going to have to rebuild the carburetor when you're done, because you're going to have to get all them chunks out of there, all them filings and everything else. So you might as well just disassemble the whole carburetor to begin with. You're going to have to use a Dremel for this, and you can use a Dremel for the whole thing if that's what you choose. But if you look right down there, I don't know how well you can see it, but you can see I'm hitting it. There's an edge. It's okay up here, but there's a big old edge all the way around the bottom, and it seems to be that way on all of these. And that's what I'm going after. That's what I'm attacking. I'm not going to change the size of this whatsoever. I'm just going to clean that up. Alright, final test. I don't know if you can see there. Just barely cleaned up some sharp edges. Here we go, final test. You really didn't think I was going to show you the final results before the first results. Before any modifications? And the first flow test. Don't be making fun of my homemade stuff. It actually works pretty good. Our first test with a 600 vacuum secondary Holley. What's your guesses? Is it actually going to flow 600? I know. Here I go again, delaying the results. But there's a couple things you need to understand before we start this test. Number one, 4-barrel carburetors are tested at 20.4 inches of water or depression. I don't know why, but I set mine H-test at 20.6. Close enough, it's not going to make really any difference. So on the left side you see depression, that's 20 inches. On the right side you see CFM, and that's what the carburetor is going to flow. On with the show. We're going to call that 518. Well, are you surprised? Okay, we'll do this again after our first modification. Test number 2, air horn removed. stabilized at 20.6. Kind of touchy, it takes a minute. There we go. Stabilized at 20.6 and 522 CFM. Time for test number 3. I'm going to call that 525. Test number 4, grinding the butterfly throttle shafts. $545, maybe $546. Alright, here we go, final test. I didn't move a lot of metal at all. I don't imagine it's going to be much different. Maxed my bench out. I can't get it up to 20.6. Look at that CFM. I can flow the most air when the voltage is the highest, and the voltage is the highest about 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'll see you in the morning. Good morning. As the vacuum motors warm up, they'll become slightly more efficient. So hopefully we can get up to 20.6. Come on, vacuum motors. There you have it, 20.6, 572 CFM. Now we're going to try my 600 double pumper. Wow. All the way up to 572 CFM. That's a far cry from a 518 it originally came from. Yeah, I know it's a 600 and it should have flowed more than that, but that's just the way it is. So this flowed 572. This one, which I ported a long time ago, and I've never used a flow bench to test these. I take it apart, rebuild it. While it's apart, I do all these modifications. So I was curious to see what this would do, since they're both 600s, and I put it on there and it flowed 533. So I brought it back, tried to compare the differences between this one and this one, and to see what was different. Well, the two things that I found that were different was that ridge down in there, it was still in there on this one. So I took the plate off, went down there with my Dremel tool, and I took the rough edges off there. And I put it back on the flow bench and flowed it, and it flowed 555. That's what it flowed. So that was a big improvement. The other difference between these two, what I did to this one that I didn't do to this one, or I didn't do as much to, was this. So we ground the throttle shaft here all the way into these rivets, trying to get more airflow. That's the second thing that's different between the one that we've been modifying and the one that I modified a long time ago. You can see where I didn't grind into the screws that hold the butterfly on. I just ground up to it on each side. And so this is probably why this one doesn't flow as well. And let's bring this one back up again. So you can see, get my hand out of the shadows, where I ground all the way into that screw, all the way across on both sides on all these. So obviously it gets just a little bit more air through there, and I'm going to say that's why this one flows 572 and this one only flows 555. I think if I ground that all out, it would pick back up and run just like this one. So we started out and it flowed 518. And then we cut the choke or the air horn off and it ran 522. And then we cleaned it all up and polished it all up and radiused everything, and it ran 525. And then we cut the throttle shafts and it went from 525 to 546. That's 21 CFM. And I think since this is 55, if we cut that back and gained 20 CFM, that would be 76 or 576, and this was 572. So it would be pretty close if I ground that out. Considering it's still stock carburetor, stock everything, nothing's really changed other than you can't use the choke because it's not there anymore. It's a pretty good modification, and really it cost you nothing. I mean, you got to rebuild it afterwards, but if you're going to rebuild the carburetor anyways, it still doesn't cost you anything to do this. Really, the only thing that costs you is if you don't have a die grinder. Well, you don't need a die grinder. All you need is a Dremel tool.
Or even a hacksaw works pretty good.
If you haven't got a Dremel tool, that's probably the only thing that's going to cost you. To gain over 60, 50 something CFM without costing you $1. If you've got a Dremel tool, it's $0, and you gain 50 CFM. If your engine needs that extra 50 CFM, that's pretty good. I mean, it's going to take you a solid day to do what I've done, but for $0, that's a no-brainer. That's a win-win. The only other thing, obviously when you buy a carburetor kit, you're going to have the instructions inside it how to rebuild a carburetor. If you've never done one before, just the instructions inside the carburetor kit will get it done. However, I have owned a whole bunch of Holley carburetor books, but this one I call my pocketbook, because although these other books that I've read get way more in depth on how to fine-tune your air bleeds and how your jets are supposed to run and your power valve channel and blah 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 blah, this is your basic carburetor circuit. When you go to rebuild one of these, you should have this handbook. I'll just rummage through here and show you a couple things. I mean, it just goes through and really basically shows you how the fuel system works, how the fuel gets drawn through the carburetor, simplistically how it's run. It gets a little more in depth as you go into it, and I'm going to start showing you the circuits, how they all go. What else we got here? The emission jets, where it has an extra number instead of just a 50 or a 52, it's a 50.3 basically. That was done back in trying to get better emissions and have a more accurate. It didn't make any difference. But anyways, this book has all that kind of information for you. Talks about the power valve. What else? Your squirters, your standard 30cc and your 50cc squirters and how to identify them. Your accelerator pump cams and how they work and how to adjust them. It's your diaphragm, how to hook it up, for vacuum secondaries, your springs for the vacuum secondaries and how they respond and how each one of them responds. It's just a lot of good stuff in here. Setting your choke, which if you're going to do this modification, you don't need anymore because you're not going to be setting your choke. It's just, like I said, it's my pocketbook, my go-to. Anytime I want to check a quick spec, I pull this one out before I pull any of the others out. And carburetor size selection, so you can decide what size carburetor compared to what cubic inch engine you have. Just a lot of good information. Fuel flow versus RPM. Just lots and lots of good stuff. How the valve body is, what each hole is and what it does. All the different valve body gaskets, the different styles for different models. You know, you can come here and do a quick reference. The one for your vacuum secondary, like's on this carburetor. Just lots of good, neat shit. You know, tells you how to disassemble the carburetor, how to clean it. Your fuel bowls and the different style of fuel bowls, whether it's a center hung or the difference between the accelerator pump with the rubber diaphragm or the check ball. Just lots of good information. Setting your accelerator pump. There's just lots and lots of good information in this book. And then of course, it's got a complete exploded view of the basic concept of a Holley carburetor. It's just a good book. I would recommend that you pick up one of these. Before you buy any other Holley book. This is the basics. This will get you going, get you understanding, get you through, and make a successful carburetor rebuild, and put some knowledge in your brain on how to troubleshoot problems when it's not doing something right. Anyways, I'm rambling on here, but if you're going to do these modifications, if you're going to rebuild a carburetor, I'd pick this book up. Well, you used to get them at any parts store. They used to be hanging up on the racks, but them days are gone. But you can get it at Amazon, and I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to purchase that. What else? Well, that about does it. So what do you think about this Holley transformation? Did you get some value out of it? Did you enjoy it? Think it's worth your time? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until my next video. Later.